Generally, on a second read through of a book, I fear that my opinion of it might take a turn for the worse. Sometimes it could be my taste changing. Sometimes it's simply that I've hyped up the book so much within my own head that after the first read, on the second, the book just doesn't match what I have built up expectations. And sometimes the book is exactly as good as I remembered it. Not any better, not any worse. But in my case, I've never read a book that I actually liked more on a second read. Until now. The Way of Kings is a book that I absolutely loved and I devoured on my first read with its captivating world building, amazing character work, and a plot that is mysterious and paced at just the right amount for what the story is. Personally, I've never understood the criticism that this book is so too slow, that it drags on too much. But even when reading it once again, knowing everything that'll happen, the plot and characters grab onto me and just refuse to let go. This is primarily due to the character work that Sanderson manages to pull off so well. He just does such a good job at building up these characters in a way that makes you immediately invested in them and their stories. Even what's widely accepted to be the worst character subplot in this book, Shallan's, still captivated me from the beginning. On this topic, there are three main characters and subplots in this book, those of Kaladin, Shallan, and Dalinar. Kaladin is a soldier who has been reduced to a slave in circumstances that are as if yet hidden to the reader, now having to carry bridges across chasms in the midst of deadly battlefields. And he's the character that this specific book puts the most focus on, delving into his backstory and his own personal character arc more than any of the other two, though they do get their own times to shine. An incredibly interesting part of the Stormlight archive is the concept that each book focuses on one character and follows their backstory and personal arcs. Shallan is a young woman who has to seek out the world's most renowned scholar to obtain a wardship, not just for an education, but for the sake of her entire family. She tends to be the fandom's least favorite character to read, perhaps because she has the least going on that directly affects the main plot of the book. The final character, Dalinar, is an old general who is the brother of the king whose assassination has caused years of war on the Shattered Plains. He struggles to maintain order and honor in a war that has forgotten the true meaning of such words. Out of the three of these, in my opinion, Kaladin's subplot was quite easily the best this book had to offer. His own character arc is just so satisfying, and the many ups and downs of his story easily justify the book's length. Dalinar and Chilan's plotlines were amazing as well, and they grow to be even better as the series goes on. But in this book, Kaladin's ends up being the best. Sanderson has a remarkable ability to make you invested in a character's journey, personality, and struggles to an incredible extent. And for this specific series, that works wonders. I'd go as far to say that the characters are maybe the best part of this book and the series as a whole, though it doesn't exactly slack in any other aspects, except maybe one. The plot is hard to describe without getting into spoilers, so I'd rather talk about it in broad terms. One aspect of the plot that stuck out to me, especially on this read through, is the amount of foreshadowing that Sanderson dumps into the story without drawing away attention from the events of. The way he does this is by spreading each bit of foreshadowing and delivering it in a multitude of different ways, whether it be stray lines of dialogue, ways he describes specific characters and events, little details that he scatters throughout the world. There were many times when I couldn't believe how far beforehand he had foreshadowed some of the biggest moments in the entire series. Of course, foreshadowing wouldn't be of importance to someone going through their first read of the series. All I'm really saying is that things like these increase the value of the rereadability factor of the series, and I'm excited to see how much more he foreshadows in the later books. For some people, the plot could drag a bit at the beginning, and I've never really had that feeling, but I can definitely see where they're coming from. But the more invested you get in these characters, ergo, the longer you read, the less it seems to drag. Eventually, simply spending time with these characters and seeing their journeys progress becomes engaging within itself, even when nothing all that relevant to the plot is actually happening. To be completely honest, the plot structure of this book is somewhat unconventional, at least unconventional to my history with books. There is no one driving force pushing the plot forward, at least it appears that way at first. Each character has their own motivation and plot thread that seems barely interconnected, except for the mention of a character and a world building aspect you've seen in another plot thread here and there. And at the beginning, due to a lot of world building thrown at you, it can seem somewhat confusing. But the key to it is just not worrying about the world building. Sure, some parts might be confusing at the start. That's because the world reveals itself to you as it goes on. It's meant to be that way. And before you know it, you'll know this world as if you've lived on it your entire life. On the topic of the world, it might just be one of the most unique I've ever seen. Granted, I'm not all that experienced in high fantasy. I only started reading the genre about 2 years ago, but out of all the worlds I've explored, this one is the most remarkably different from art. The amount of new concepts Sanderson brings to the table with this, all centered around the high storms, from the flora and fauna to the religions and history of the world. And of course, Sanderson is known for his hard magic systems across the entire fantasy sphere. But in this specific book, there really isn't much focus on the magic. Sure, there are hints, but the hard rules only really come into play later in the series, as opposed to Mistborn, which introduces them right out of the gate in the first book. One of the main criticisms leveled against this book and Sanderson's writing as a whole is that his prose is lackluster. Now, as someone who's grown up reading a bunch of books geared towards middle grade or YA audiences, prose isn't much of a concern to me, unless it's bad, like really bad. And I think most people would agree that Sanderson's prose isn't exactly bad at all. In fact, I'd argue it's pretty damn good. Sure, it doesn't stack up to other writers' flowery writing, but it makes sense for what the story is trying to be, and it definitely has its moments. And when a part of the story is exactly what it intends, I'd count that as a success. Plus, I feel like compared to Mistborn and a variety of his earlier work, it's improved a lot. And as the Cosmere continues and his bibliography grows, it will only continue to improve, especially now with the secret projects, in which his writing style has dramatically changed, though it's not bound to be permanent. Overall, this still holds up as one of my favorite books as all time. I still hold to my opinion that this book is paced perfectly, following some absolutely amazing characters and a plot that has a destination well worth the journey. And that's not saying anything about the journey, because it's incredible, if not even more so. With that, I give The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson a 98 out of 100, my highest rating ever, stacking up right alongside the 11 Wheel of Time book as my favorite book of all time, as of yet. Enjoy the rest of the drawing because it's gonna take a while.